During the First World War, Germany was a prominent operator of battleships and battlecruisers, and on the 7th of April 1914, they laid down the keel to the final battleship they would ever work on, and by the time the war concluded, that ship had not yet been completed. All of Germany's existing operational battleships and battlecruisers were handed over to the Allies, interred at Scapa Flow, and they were eventually scuttled in 1919 by their own crews. After the war, several treaties culminated to result in Germany being forbidden from constructing battleships until the mid-1930s, when, on the 14th of February 1934, the keel to the battleship Scharnhorst was laid down as the first battleship Germany would construct in 2 decades. Even though Germany was forbidden from building battleships, there was nothing the Allies could really do to prevent German designers from working on battleship designs, keeping Germany's ideology around battleship construction up to date with foreign powers. In 1932, German designers began work on unofficial plans for a 35,000-ton battleship to combine the strongest possible armament, protection, and speed on such a small displacement. Following ideas laid out by Britain to produce battleships of small size and small caliber, the Germans considered a displacement of 35,000 tons feasible if the main battery was made up of 30-centimeter or 12-inch guns on a relatively well-protected hull and a maximum speed of roughly 30 knots. The Germans were not inclined to go with the 30-centimeter gun again because the French had begun work on the Dunkirk-class battleships, which mounted 8 33-centimeter guns, and they offered relatively good protection and high speed, with a displacement less than that of 35,000 tons, which meant that there was a physical example of a ship that could be produced small with good characteristics. As a result of the statistics being learned from the Dunkirk's design, the Germans opted to investigate a ship mounting 35-centimeter guns so that the Germans could have a slight edge over the French, and, based on a 30-knot speed and armor protection to defend it against its own weapons, the Germans ended up with a 41,000-ton design. Shortly after investigating the 35-centimeter design, Italy and France both announced that they would be constructing 35,000-ton standard displacement battleships armed with 38-centimeter guns, and as a result, the German government, specifically Adolf Hitler, intervened and stated that any future design work on German battleships should have no less than 38-centimeter guns, but preferably 40-centimeter guns. As a result of this, in 1934, the German Navy ordered design work to begin on both 38 and 40-centimeter guns, and when barrels were completed, for them to be tested and evaluated. While the main battery guns were being designed and built, discussions shifted towards the propulsion system as the Germans had 3 options available to them: diesel engines, steam turbines, or turbo-electric engines. Much like during the First World War, many favorable arguments were placed forward for diesel engines because they were more fuel efficient and allowed the ship to be smaller. However, no diesel engine had been produced large enough to propel a 35,000-ton battleship successfully. This meant they were unreliable, and in the event the engines failed on the completed ship, there would be almost no way of replacing them. Other designers argued in favor of the turbo-electric drive because the United States used them on the aircraft carriers Lexington and Saratoga, and more recently, the French had used it on the massive ocean liner Normandy. What the designers did not know about Lexington and Saratoga at the time is that when they had first entered service, the United States had many technical issues with the turbo-electric drive, and this meant that the carriers often had to undergo repairs. Meanwhile, in the case of Normandy, with the ship being so large, it was recognized that the turbo-electric drive was much heavier than diesel or steam turbines. The ultimate deciding factor on not using the turbo-electric drive is that the Germans themselves had minimal experience in developing such engines, and producing them on a massive ship was virtually impossible given the amount of time. At the end of the day, it was decided that trusty old steam turbines would be the propelling force for the new battleships. During the spring of 1934, the German government officially authorized the Navy to begin official design work on Battleship F. As a result of the previous 2 years of unofficial design work, early discussions surrounded the displacement of the battleships, since, legally, no one could produce battleships surpassing 35,000 tons standard displacement, yet, with the option to go no less than with a 38-centimeter gun, the Germans were in a difficult predicament. It was decided very early on that the new class of battleships would mount 8 38-centimeter guns in 4 twin turrets, rather than triple or quadruple turrets like the Italian and French battleships. The Germans opted to go with dual turrets for various reasons. Firstly, the torpedo defense system surrounding magazines for triple turrets would be thinner than offered with dual turret magazines, and so in order to give the ship the best chances against underwater hits, it was decided that dual turrets were better for ammunition storage alongside the torpedo defense system. It was also recognized that having 4 guns forward and 4 guns aft gave the ship better fields of fire with the maximum potential over bow and stern being achieved, yet not using quadruple turrets prevented multiple guns from being knocked out in a single hit, in theory. There was a significant drawback to using 4 dual turrets in comparison to 3 triples or 2 quadruples. The ship dimensionally had to be larger, and this meant that it would struggle to fit through the Kiel Canal and at the docks within Wilhelmshaven port. Luckily for Germany, their fortunes would begin to change, as on the 18th of June 1935, they signed the Anglo-German Naval Agreement, which allowed Germany to legally produce battleships to foreign treaty terms. This meant 35,000 tons with 38-centimeter guns, though, in the event that Japan and Italy did not sign the Second London Naval Treaty by April of 1937, the escalator clause would come into effect, which Germany was legally allowed to participate in, which meant that battleships could then be increased to a 45,000-ton standard displacement and mount 16-inch guns. Japan had already made it clear they had no intention of signing the treaty, and this meant the escalator clause was guaranteed to take effect, so Germany had less restrictions on building battleships outside of geography. Shortly after signing the Anglo-German Naval Agreement, the new class of battleships' basic design requirements were set forward. The standard displacement was to be around 35,000 tons, the length was not to exceed 250 meters, the beam was not to exceed 38 meters, the draft was not to exceed 10 meters, the main armament was to be made up of 8 38-centimeter guns in 4 twin turrets, the secondary battery was an unspecified number of 15-centimeter guns, also in twin turrets. The long-range AA was to be 10-centimeter guns, while the short-range AA was to be 37mm guns. The ship needed to be capable of making at least 30 knots maximum speed on steam turbines, and it had to have an endurance of at least 8,000 nautical miles at 19 knots, with 20% fuel in reserve, just in case the ship got caught up in a battle. Its armor protection needed to be capable of resisting 38-centimeter shells fired from 20 to 30,000 meters distance, and the torpedo defense system needed to be capable of resisting a 250-kilogram torpedo. The basic design requirements were plugged into a series of designs, and a ship with a standard displacement of 43,900 tons was created, with a full load displacement of 51,300 tons, and it would have a maximum draft of 10.4 meters. All 3 of these numbers greatly exceeded the design requirements. The displacement was not too much of a concern, however, the draft was. The Kiel Canal on average was 11 meters deep, so 10.4 meters did not provide enough of a margin for maneuverability, and as a result, the designers needed to lessen the draft to at least 10 meters. Luckily for the Germans, the propulsion technology available in the mid-1930s allowed them to design a ship with a length of 240 meters, which was 10 meters less than the design requirements. Before long, a new request came in to investigate designs with increased fuel capacities, as Germany had no overseas ports, and refueling at sea in the First World War proved to be a difficult task for ships on such a large scale, so increasing the endurance as much as possible was seen as necessary. But on the 11th of February 1937, the construction office wrote to Admiral Raeder, "In view of the difficult conditions in our harbors, a displacement of 42,000 tons should be the limit of the ships to be built unless we widen the harbors and channels and also the curves of the Kiel Canal. Politically, it must be decided if the displacement should be still further increased above the treaty limits. The construction office considers that no further increase should take place as long as we are obliged to the 35,000-ton limit, which we have already exceeded by 7,000 tons, so that a further increase could hardly be concealed. The construction office would like to build an extra ship rather than exceed the 35,000-ton limit. Even if other navies renounce the limits of the London Naval Treaty or choose calibers above 380 millimeters, we should be reluctant to increase them owing to the state of our harbor channels and our treaty obligations. A decision cannot be reached until the various aspects, including the military factors and the clauses of the treaty, have been considered. As a result of this letter, Admiral Werner Fuchs recommended a series of design alterations to Admiral Raeder and Adolf Hitler, which would reduce the overall displacement and cost of the ships, and both men would agree to the alterations. As a result of their approval, a set of characteristics were created, and contracts were sent out to two shipyards, Blohm & Voss and Wilhelmshaven, for the construction of two battleships, one at each yard. The new standard displacement was to be 41,673 tons, with a full load displacement of 49,136 tons. The waterline length was to be 241 meters, the waterline beam was to be 36 meters, the draft standard was to be 8.7 meters, while maximum it was to be 9.9 meters. The armament was to be made up of 8 38cm SK C-34 guns, 12 15cm SK C-28 guns, 16 10.5cm SK C-33 and SK C-33NA guns, along with 16 3.7cm SK C-30 guns and 12 2cm C-30 guns. The ship's propulsion plant would be made up of 3 turbines powered by 12 Wegener-type steam boilers, producing 136,200 shaft horsepower, providing a maximum speed of 30 knots and a normal speed of 29 knots. The ship had a fuel capacity of 8,294 metric tons, providing it with an endurance of 9,500 nautical miles at 19 knots. The ship would be supplied with a distributed armor scheme, which meant the numerical values throughout the entire length of the ship were very inconsistent. Some of the major numbers are an upper belt of 145 millimeters, a main belt of 320 millimeters, a torpedo bulkhead of 45 millimeters, a turret faceplate of 360 millimeters, with the roof being 130 millimeters, the conning tower face being up to 350 millimeters, with its roof being 220 millimeters, and the barbets each being 220 millimeters. A handful of alterations would be made to the superstructure of the ship after the contracts were signed with the shipbuilders. Most notably, the 3 aircraft catapults were removed, and a single catapult was installed running across the beam of the ship, connecting to 3 primary hangars that could house up to 4 aircraft. The other major change to the superstructure had to do with the location of the Admiral's Bridge, as it was moved further aft than was initially intended due to firing trials with a 38cm gun. It was found that the blast pressure was too great for the Admiral's Bridge in its intended location, so it had to be moved aft so that the personnel within it were kept safe when turret Bruno was firing at extreme aftward angles. This meant a couple of the numbers regarding the ship's statistics changed. Its standard displacement rose to 43,980 tons, with a full load displacement of 51,760 tons. Its overall length was 251 meters, with a waterline length of 241.5 meters, and its beam was 36 meters. The boilers would also see some slight alterations, which meant the completed ships had a maximum machinery output of 150,170 shaft horsepower, allowing the ships to move at 30.1 knots. Design work for Battleship F was completed on the 16th of November 1935, and its keel was laid down on the 1st of July 1936 at the Blohm & Voss shipyard in Hamburg, Germany. It was launched on the 14th of February 1939, and commissioned on the 24th of August 1940 as Bismarck. The plans for Battleship G were completed on the 16th of June 1936, and the keel was laid down on the 30th of October 1936 at the Wilhelmshaven Navy Yard. It was launched on the 1st of April 1939 and commissioned on the 25th of February 1941 as Tirpitz. Though Germany did not know it at the time they began construction of these two battleships, they would be the final battleships Germany would complete, and they would be the largest battleships built out of any European nation. With that having been said, there is nothing more to add on to this topic for today. So, if you have learned something new in this video, why not leave a like and a comment down below, and have a wonderful day.